I'm honestly torn on how to feel about this episode. On one hand, Crocalor finally evolves into Skeledirge, which is something that should automatically make this a great episode. This is a huge milestone for Roy and his partner, and it's something we've been waiting for and building towards for a long time. But on the other hand, the battle that leads to this evolution is underwhelming, and unfortunately, this really holds the episode back. The problem is that this battle is almost a carbon copy of the one we saw in episode 116, to the point that I could use some footage from that episode instead, and you probably wouldn't notice. You'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. We have the same 2 trainers, 4 Pokemon, arena, and strategies, which means a lot of the same moves, choreography, and flow, which means they also end up reusing a lot of the same animations. So for a good while, it genuinely feels like I'm just watching the same battle again. Now yes, I know what you might be thinking. Of course it's similar. It's a rematch. This is true, of course, but a rematch doesn't mean you have to make the battle feel almost identical. A rematch just means it's the same 2 trainers facing each other again. In the previous anime, Ash battled many characters more than once, such as his rivals and several gym leaders. But the rematches never felt the same. Even when some of the same Pokemon were involved, the format, battlefield, strategies, and stakes would change. They still felt like rematches, but they also felt like new battles. That's the key difference. Now, to be fair, this is not entirely the same battle, which is what ultimately saves it from being a complete flop. Kilowattrel and the Crocalor improve their already incredible teamwork by having Crocalor essentially turn into a rocket engine using flamethrower to boost their speed. This is clever, cool, superbly animated. It's literally one of the best sequences in the battle, and effective, allowing them to break through Hurricane, keep up with Kingdra post Swift Swim, and defeat it with Spark and Disarming Voice. So this time, Roy actually strikes first. Unlike last time, Drayton is the one who loses a Pokemon first and is forced into a 1v2. This changes the dynamic of the battle significantly, especially because Drayton decides to stop messing around and start taking the battle seriously. Archaludon holds its own impressively, even stopping a literal missile strike from Crocalor dive bombing it with Flame Charge, which is so epic and powerful, like you feel the weight of the impact. I also love how Kilowattrel sweeps in to save Crocalor from Electro Shot afterwards. Impeccable teamwork and animation. Roy's advantage is short-lived, however, because Kilowattrel ends up having to sacrifice itself to protect Crocalor, which is admirable, turning the battle into a 1v1 showdown, something that did not happen last time and is actually a big deal. Because a double battle dropping down into a final 1v1 is inherently intense because teamwork and coordination go out the window. Instead, it all comes down to 2 Pokemon at the end of their rope putting everything they have left on the line while also carrying the will of their fallen teammate. Something Crocalor feels more deeply since Kilowattrel fell for his sake. This doesn't just allow the rematch to further distinguish itself from the first battle, it also probably makes this the best double battle we've had in Horizons so far. Previous double battles always ended abruptly when one side lost a Pokemon or one side would be utterly crushed, losing both Pokemon. We haven't had the last man standing scenario play out until now. Better yet, the 1v1 between Crocalor and Archaludon is what really elevates this battle and stops it from collapsing under the weight of its own repetition. Archaludon's stomping tantrum with its bare hands is epic, as is Crocalor forcing the stone to go through anyways with sheer willpower. And their head-on clash with Flamethrower and Electro Shot, which creates a spectacular vortex of fire and electricity, is a sight to behold. I love that the evolution ultimately comes after Roy and Crocalor reminisce about everything they've been through while pushing themselves beyond their limits. I especially love that the egg on Crocalor's head shakes and jumps before the battle even begins, foreshadowing the evolution that he's right at the edge, needing one final push. Then, during the battle, the shaking and the jumping get faster and more energetic, clearly signaling that the evolution is getting closer and closer. And right as it's about to begin, the egg hatches first. The little bird flies up, spreads its wings, and only when it lands back on Crocalor does the evolution begin. This is a fantastic, fitting, and a very thematic way to handle the birth of Skeledirge. The little bird even dances post-evolution, likely out of happiness because it was finally born. A cute detail. That said, I do have to admit that I'm a bit disappointed with the animation of the evolution itself. It doesn't look bad, but it also doesn't look anywhere near as spectacular as a starter evolving into its final form should look. Floragato's evolution, for example, had dynamic camera work, strong staging, and a real sense of scale and drama. It felt cinematic and like a huge moment. Not to mention, it was gorgeously animated. By comparison, Crocalor's evolution feels kind of plain. It's missing that extra layer of polish, flair, and spectacle that would have really sold the moment. And that's a shame, because this is a very important evolution, both for Roy and for the series. Thankfully, the final clash between Skeledirge and Archaludon does manage to reach such lofty heights. They both terrastalize and pour everything they have left into Flamethrower and the Draco Meteor. Meteors rain across the battlefield, explosions are going off everywhere, and the Skeledirge just continues blasting Archaludon, who in turn refuses to stop the meteor shower. They both tank an unending flurry of attacks like absolute units, which is so epic and intense. It all comes down to a brutal test of stamina and willpower. Who can outlast the other? When the smoke finally clears, both Pokemon are down, and for a moment, it genuinely looks like the battle might end in a draw, which honestly I would have been perfectly fine with. But then Skeledirge gets back up, and I really love that the little bird plays a role again here. It's the bird who encourages him to get back up, giving Roy the win, which I have mixed feelings about. I honestly didn't think Roy was going to win, and now I'm not fully convinced that he should have. Last time, Roy was completely outclassed, and now, just 3 episodes later, Roy manages to win. Barely, yes, but still. We're talking about Roy defeating a member of the Elite Four he lost to not too long ago without really doing much to get stronger or improve since said defeat. Episode 117 was focused almost entirely on Oat and Lacey. Roy appeared briefly, relaxing with a slack off, which isn't really training. Episode 118 was all about Liko and Hatrim's evolution. Roy only showed up briefly at the very end. And now, suddenly, in episode 119, he's strong enough to defeat Drayton? How? Like, whenever Ash lost badly to someone, the rematch usually came after a clear training arc, he devised a new strategy, or some kind of breakthrough, such as a new move or an evolution, and all these things sometimes took multiple episodes. He would learn from his mistakes, adapt, and then come back stronger and better. The win felt earned because we clearly saw the growth that led to it. Roy goes from being completely crushed to being told to chill out to suddenly winning. We never really see the training or breakthrough that led to this, so the jump in performance feels abrupt. This is why I think a draw would have worked better. It would have felt more natural and believable while still showing growth on Roy's part. Now, to be fair, I can see what they were going for thematically. Before the battle, Roy is uncharacteristically impatient. He is rushing ahead, tense, not listening, and doing the exact opposite of chilling out like Drayton said. This is what prompts Drayton to challenge him in the first place. And during the battle, Roy gradually settles down, focuses on the moment, and fights more calmly and deliberately instead of just charging in. So you can argue that the real difference this time is Roy's mindset. He's battling with more focus, control, and presence in the moment. This change in mentality is what allows him to win. The problem is that I don't think this is explored deeply enough to fully sell the payoff. I see the idea and understand the lesson, but it doesn't feel as strong, layered, or satisfying as it should for a victory of this magnitude. For a mini arc that is supposed to be about training and growth, this conclusion feels a bit undercooked, because they, ironically, skipped the training. Last thing I want to mention before moving on is that I love the interaction between Skeledirge and Kilowattrel after the battle. They just look at each other, but you can feel the mutual respect and admiration between them. The fact that Kilowattrel isn't that surprised, like it knew Skeledirge would win and evolve, and that Skeledirge knows he couldn't have done it without Kilowattrel and appreciates everything it's done for him. Their friendship and partnership is undeniably powerful, and it's fitting we get such a moment since one of the flashbacks pre-evolution was them flying together for the first time. Truly, they only got this far together. Now, beyond the battle, the other major focus of this episode is the conclusion Briar reaches regarding Pagogo. She has been quietly conducting her research in the background, meaning that they realistically and organically built up to this moment across several episodes, ensuring that this doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere, continuing the trend of showing slow and steady progress for things that aren't the focus. Something I've praised about almost every episode in this arc thus far. So, it turns out that Diana was mostly correct in episode 108. Pagogo can only reach its full power and eliminate Lacueum for good if it can draw power from all 18 types. There is just one caveat. It needs Tera types specifically. Additionally, the Pokemon providing these types do need to be on the same level as the heroes, which answers one question I had following episode 108. Speaking of questions I had, I also wondered if dual type Pokemon count for two types. The need for Tera types specifically answers this question, since a Pokemon can only have one Tera type. Since there are only 6 heroes, Liko and friends will need 12 more Pokemon on their level. Whether this means finding Pokemon like them, legendary, giant, ancient, etc., in much the same way they found the original heroes, or using their own Pokemon, provided they are strong enough, remains to be seen. Personally, I think the former is much more exciting. Watching the main cast track down new, special, powerful Pokemon across the world feels much more in the spirit of Horizons than just using the Pokemon they already have on hand. Either way though, this reveal gives us a very clear long-term goal and structure for where the story is headed. The last thing I want to discuss is something that honestly surprised me. This episode marks the end of the Blueberry Academy chapter, since Liko and friends leave at the end of the episode, so they were only here for 5 episodes, which is very little, especially when you compare it to Naranja Academy and the Terrasto debut arc, which ran from episode 46 to episode 67, over 20 episodes. I understand that Naranja Academy is part of the main Scarlet and Violet story, while Blueberry Academy comes from an expansion. So naturally, it was never going to be that long. But still, 4 episodes feels like barely scratching the surface. Because of this, I can't help but feel like a lot of potential was wasted. This was supposed to be a training arc, yet the only character who really got a proper series of meaningful battles was Roy. Ult had 2 short, story-focused battles. Liko had a few very brief training battles, some against the wild Pokemon, and Dot's only battle was a short gag battle against Carmine. There could and should have been more. More training, more development, more battles, more spotlight for Blueberry Academy characters. Like 2 members of the Elite Four, Crisping and Amaris, and even the champion Kieran only show up for a silent cameo in this episode. They don't speak, battle, or interact. They are just here as a quick Easter egg, basically. It's exactly what happened with Arben. He was technically present but never actually used. Lacey, Carmine, and Drayton are great characters, and I'm glad they got some focus, but even they could have benefited from more time. This setting could have supported a much longer, richer arc with more training, rivalries, and meaningful growth. I understand that in the grand scheme of the story, Blueberry Academy is just a stop along the road. The real plot is elsewhere. But still, I can't help but feel that leaving this soon is very unfortunate. At the very least, we do get some heartfelt farewells, and the episode makes it clear that it feels like this won't be the last time we will see these characters. I really hope that's true. So overall, this episode is a mixed bag. On one hand, Crocalor finally evolving is a huge, long-awaited milestone for Roy, his journey, and this series. Once the battle begins to distinguish itself from the previous one, it manages to deliver some very cool and thrilling moments that are well animated. Chief among them, the final clash with Archaludon, which is intense, visually striking, and emotionally charged. And Briar's big reveal about Pagogo is genuinely one of the most important pieces of information we've gotten in a while. It gives the story a clear direction and raises the stakes in a very meaningful way. But on the other hand, the path we took to get here feels a bit messy. The battle being so similar to the previous one makes it feel less special than it should. Roy's victory, while exciting in the moment, doesn't feel as fully earned as it could have. Similarly, while Crocalor finally evolving was undoubtedly exciting, I also think it lacked the level of flair, polish, and impact such a moment deserves. And the fact that the Blueberry Academy arc ends so quickly is extremely disappointing. There really was a chance here to allow everyone to grow in noticeable, tangible ways through battles, rivalries, and repeated challenges. Instead, this was more of a brief vacation. An important one, yes, but also a fleeting one that left a lot of potential on the table that was either undercooked or untapped. That said, I'm still genuinely excited to see where the story goes next. After all, personal grievances aside, this series isn't about staying in one place, but about traveling and adventuring instead. And now, with a clear, monumental objective in mind, the stage is set for some epic and amazing things to happen. So episode 119 is a turning point. Not a perfect one, not as satisfying as it could have been, but an important one nonetheless. It closes one door and it opens a much bigger one. If you enjoyed this video and wanted to see more like it, feel free to click the links on screen. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making content like this, you can find all the ways to do so in the description and in the pinned comment. Whether it's through a small donation or just watching and sharing, every bit of support means the world to me. Thank you so very much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.